Compression thinking really is the art and science of learning to do better while using much less.
Hey, Doc. For people who are just being introduced to this, compression and the compression model, how could you sum all that up?
You can sum a lot of this up by how can we learn to do as well or much better and use a lot less stuff.
What is the Compression Institute trying to do to help business owners and managers deal with some of these issues? Hello and welcome to the first ever Compression Institute podcast. My name is Ethan Berry, and today I'll be talking with Robert Doc Hall of the Compression Institute about how people can start living much better lives using a lot less stuff. So, Doc Hall is Professor Emeritus at the Indiana University Kelley School of Business. He's also the author of Compression, which explains in depth some of the things we'll be talking about today. Doc started out in manufacturing, and after a career of promoting lean operations in corporations all over the world, he came to the conclusion that business as usual has put the earth and all of the creatures living on it at risk. He's calling for a transformation in values, in how we think, and how we measure our health.
Coach calls me in and said, well, you know Albert's fast, but...
Okay.
I'm Robert Hall, nickname's Doc, because for 33 years I was professor at the Kelley School of Business, Indiana University. But my real career for about 60 years now is manufacturing, beginning in a little shop with belt-driven machines when I was a teenager.
Doc has been around a long time, written several books. I met Doc years ago. He wrote a book called Zero Inventories. And I had just accepted a job as an inventory manager coming out of the factory for a company called Clark Equipment, and I didn't know jack. And he gave a presentation at the University of Kentucky, and I listened to him, bought the book, and become a hero. He's a great guy, interesting to talk with, got more BS than you'll run into anywhere in the country. He tells stories from 1919. It is Doc Hall.
First, you may have noticed I have a hard time standing up very long at a time, so I may sit down. I always like to quote from that great management guru, Groucho Marx, that success in business depends on honesty and transparency. Learn to fake that and you got it made. We need a more relationship-oriented economy, and one in which we think about what the consequences are of what we do physically before we say we've got to make money doing this. That leads to something else that I've been dealing with some companies with. How do you make your profit a engineering specification of what you do? An engineering specification of your product or your business model, and it's not the objective. That's a huge difference. So I call it being a company or an organization that is mission driven. It is not profit driven, because being profit driven puts the cart before the horse. And there are an awful lot of problems from saying we want this financial result, so now what do we have to do to get it, and disregard all the adverse consequences that might take place. So you need somebody local that can set up a learning group that cuts across the existing structures for regulating water. That's an example. So I do not say this is going to be an easy thing to do. But the necessity is to go across those boundaries and try to engage stakeholders that have not been previously engaged. What about the folks down in the bum part of town where the sewage isn't good and the water pipes leak? And what do they think? And what are you going to do for them? And if you're going to cut water use, what is the impact going to be all the way around? And can you interest people in trying to help with this? And most important, what programs can you come up with that may over time change people's thinking, values, and habits about using water? This has been done one or two places, and people can get along usually on quarter to half as much water as they used to use just when they become conscious that they're wasting it. Just about everybody in Venice figures that they have something going that the rest of the world doesn't, and they can sell it. If I make batteries, and they contain mercury, which they do, and these batteries cannot be easily separated from a waste stream, and we're going to incinerate the waste stream, now we put mercury in the air. Can we figure out how to avoid that kind of a problem before it happens? That's just one example. So look at what we do physically and say, what is likely to be the long-term consequences of doing this, and how do we not clean it up at the end? How do we prevent so we don't have a lot to clean up? And cleaning up is a problem that frequently is, business people call it an external problem. It's not my problem, I made my money. It's somebody else's problem, they can make a business out of that. This is not systemic thinking. This is everybody thinking for themselves, how do I make a little piddly bunch of money, and then other people can make money cleaning up my mess. This does not work. Sooner or later, everybody else that has that problem is going to turn on you, and you can no longer get by with that. So what do we do to change the design of products, the design of processes, what we think quality of life really is? You know, there are deep questions here, but what do we have to change to live in symbiosis with the environment that we really have to live in? Recognizing that's the key to a much better future. Trying to change something like values is, of course, the toughest thing we ever have to do. I don't like to do it. I don't know of anybody else that does. However, we have a real problem with values that put far too much emphasis on doing well as a company or as a little local group, and forgetting about anybody and everybody else, including sometimes the stakeholders in our own company. So we have a system in which the motivations drive people apart. The classic one going way back is labor versus management. What do we do? Well, you take it out maybe on the employees, cut the wages. Most of that is dedicated to preserving the wealth and the well-being of the ownership, whatever that is. It may be distant people in the stock market, it may be a person locally. But that thinking leads that direction. If you think multi-stakeholder, now you have to think about all the consequences of believing that way. That's a huge values change. It's a total change from the only business of business is business. Therefore, if everybody's making a profit, surely we're doing okay. And we're at the point where we've got to rethink how the system works to get past that. Let's talk about a regenerative economy. A lot of nature's been driven out here. There was a lot more wildlife here only a few weeks ago. And where did it go? And these kinds of projects are going on all over the world. We cannot continue to do this kind of project and expect nature to continue to take care of us, because we keep pushing and pushing and pushing. What we think is development, nature sees as incursion on nature's space. And so, are you nostalgic for nature? Not if you've never been around it. Probably not. So get around it. Really see what's happening when these projects take place. It's before or after who else has joined. This is a pretty tough subject. Okay, just go ahead and what caused you to write that, or what comments do you want to make about deep ecology? The tough leap for me, and I think a lot of people, is how do you for yourself or in working or guiding other people make that leap from the deep purpose to actually making something happen that has a good outcome, that goes in the right direction. And I'm convinced you can't do that without being involved. We have these monthly conversations, kind of sharing what people are doing, and this one was particularly useful. The subject was deep ecology. And so everybody has the specifics that they do, but what is it that's sort of the inner guide that makes you do it? Coming to the realization that I am just a part of a very small universe. I am kind of a nothing. If I lose myself in this bigger environment, I have discovered myself. It gives me a reason to do these things. To do that, you have to take care of the environment that takes care of us. That's the realization. So can you help us imagine that and what a different kind of world like that could look like? Love to hear from you.
You can participate by calling the number provided on our webpage. You can check out Doc's many papers, videos, and book reviews at the same website, www.compression.org.